Hello, everyone. Robyn Mowatt. I'm a staff writer at OK Player, and today I'm going to be taking you through the steps of how to pitch an editorial. And you might ask yourself, who am I? What is she going to offer about pitching stories to publications? But for anyone who's not familiar with what an editorial is a piece of written content that lives online, or it might also live in a print publication that you can pick up at a grocery store or maybe a beauty supply store. And pitching editorials is something that's pretty important if you're interested in being a journalist or you're interested in being an editor, because it basically starts you off on your career journey. And you might even be asking, why am I qualified to have this lesson and teach you what this even is? So for me, I started off at Ebony Magazine, 2015, fresh out of college. I went to Florida A&M University and studied journalism. And at my first internship at Ebony, I learned a lot about writing, figuring out the different topics that I enjoyed writing about. One of them was mainly culture, another was music, entertainment, and also fashion. And after I was at Ebony, I kept moving up, and the other publications that I was able to intern at and also write for included Rack.com, which is a part of Box. I've also freelanced for TeenVogue.com. I've also freelanced for Essence.com, also freelanced for Revolt.com, also freelanced for Nylon.com. And all of those experiences shaped and molded me into the writer and editor that I am today. And I'm currently at okplayer.com, and I cover culture, entertainment, and also a little bit of the fashion market, which speaks to my background as well, because I was a fashion assistant at Elle for a little bit before my other gig, not done, still going on the list. I was at Hypebeast, but I was an editor for Hypebae.com. And during my time there, I also covered fashion, culture, and music. And once again, to say that all of those different publications shaped me into the person that I am today, currently still writing about culture 5 years later, 2020. And just wanted to give you a little bit of that backstory so that you could understand all of the roles made me who I am today. And each editor, journalist, writer, reporter, they have a myriad of experiences that speak to who they are. And all of the publications shape and mold them into who they are. Oh, whoa, I see a question coming in. How many hours have I put in during my journey? Whoa, I'd say there's this quote that's like, if you dedicate maybe 10,000 hours to a task, you'll become perfect at it. I'm not going to say that I'm at 10,000 hours, but I might be close. In terms of the amount of stories that I've written, definitely over 1,000 at this point, might be even at 2,000. But let me get back to why you're here. Pitching an editorial. So just want to start off by running through the 4 major points of what it takes for you to pitch an editorial. First, you need to come up with what publication you would like to write for. Secondly, you need to figure out what subject that you want to write about. Third, you need to figure out the rate, because we don't do anything for free. There's a price on everything. Fourth, you need to figure out what makes you different and sets you apart from all of the pitches that editors are having. And honestly, I just want to let you know, sometimes you can slide into the DMs to get an editor's email. There's also some really cool methods that I'm going to share with you that I have used in the past to figure out people's emails, in addition to searching on Twitter, which I have found to be very helpful. So going back to step 1, figuring out which publication you are going to be writing for. I would say the best way to figure out which publication that you're interested in writing for is figure out what are the publications that you find yourself waking up, rolling over, and reading on your phone. Or you might be like me. You might hop on Twitter the first thing in the morning. And honestly, it's kind of a new newspaper for millennials, maybe Gen Z. I live on Twitter. So for me, one of the publications that I find myself reading first thing in the morning, sometimes it's The Cut. which is a great publication. It kind of talks about culture, fashion, politics through the lens of women. And those are some topics that I'm really interested in, which is why I always find myself going on that platform. Also, give you another example, Essence, Ebony, those are also two publications that I do sometimes read and really find myself going back to. So what you're really going to have to do is evaluate and do the research on which publications that you find yourself constantly going to. That might be Teen Vogue, that might be Vogue, that might be 17, that might be Cosmopolitan, that might be GQ, could even be Men's Health. If you find yourself constantly going back to a publication, that is the publication that you should be writing for. You know their voice, you know their tone, and I think that you need to be excited about whichever publication that you're getting ready to pitch to. Once you pinpoint which publication you're going to be writing for, move on to step 2, the subject. And when you're figuring out which subject that you want to write about, don't stress yourself out at all. Like, this should be something that comes naturally to you. If you're into fashion, are you interested in writing something about a cool tie-dyeing method that you found out by just experimenting in your home? I actually tie-dyed a shirt recently. Definitely didn't look like the shirt that I thought it was going to look like, but I still did it. Next, if you're interested in writing a quick listicle, maybe top 10 things that you would wear outside the house right now if we weren't quarantined, that's something popular right now. If you do the research and check out what's going on in the fashion market on sites like whowhatwear.com or teenvogue.com or even essence.com, you'll get a feel for what the fashion editors at these platforms might be interested in having a freelance writer or an aspiring writer handle. So you've got to do the research. Those are just examples for fashion. In terms of music, culture, and entertainment subject areas, it could even be an emerging actor, an emerging actress, an emerging musician. If you're into profiles, which are stories that are featuring maybe like a celebrity, you'll have to understand that you're not only going to have to interview that talent, you're going to also have to interview people that are close to that artist or musician or actress. So you have to keep those sorts of things in mind with the level of access that you have. So if you're just starting out and you don't know anyone famous or don't have any connections to anyone famous, that's fine. You don't have to aim that high right now. Maybe you know the mayor in your town. Maybe you know the pastor at your church. Your family may have a relationship with them. That's still fair game, and that could be interesting if there's an interesting story there. So definitely keep that in mind. Music, culture, and entertainment. If that takes a little bit more time for you to figure out, that's completely fine as well. So once you have your subject area of what you're interested in writing, this is going to be a part of the email that you send over to an editor. And so what you're going to do is tailor the subject line to whatever type of story you're going to write. It could be high school aged girl wants to write about X, Y, and Z. That could be a great subject to start off with for an editor at Teen Vogue, an editor maybe at 17, an editor at Cosmo. Honestly, maybe even an editor at a place like GQ, because if it's an interesting pitch, the editor's gonna open their inbox and they're gonna see something like that and they're gonna click on it if it's a unique subject to them. So once you've got that subject line of that email, you're gonna move along to the paragraphs that you're gonna be writing for that editor. And it's really important. My last job at Hypebae, you really are going to have to gauge the attention of that editor for 10 to 20 seconds, maybe even 30. I'm being generous. If you don't get past that 30-second mark, they're going to close that email. And just keeping it real with you, you've really got to capture their attention between that 10 to 30-second period. Once you do that with those 1 to 3 sentences, you're able to also provide a little bit more context to what you want to write about. Maybe you want to write about a new food, or maybe you want to write about a pair of pants that you're obsessed with, you have to really keep that story going within those first 3 sentences. And then once you get below those 3 sentences, if you want to add a few bullet points that make your story even more unique, that's how you can keep telling that story, shaping that narrative to grasp that editor's attention. And then we're going to move on to step 3, which is the rate. And I honestly, this is just my method for the emails that I've sent in the past that have been successful. I typically place my rate honestly at the bottom of emails. And honestly, when determining your rate, it's really up to you. If you're just starting out, completely fine to start at $40 or $50 for your rate. There's no problem with that. If you're more experienced, maybe you're in college and you've been freelancing consistently. Maybe you're post-college and you're really interested in jumping into the field and you're not that familiar. Completely fine to have your rate set at maybe $150, $200, $250 if you feel that you have that experience. But also I want to stress that if you're just starting out, completely fine, like I said, to start at around $50 or $40. But if you do have more experience, don't be afraid to throw out the large numbers in the very beginning, whether that be 200, 300, 400, 500. Don't shy away from that because you're going to be able to negotiate that rate with the editor that you're emailing if they do happen to respond to you. And the last step that I wanted to be sure to cover for you all is what makes you different. This is not something that you're going to have to type out unless you really do want to type that out. I have typically been asking myself that specific question, what makes me different, when I've been pitching recently before I send off that pitch. Because if the editor sees this email come in and they're just kind of perusing through it and they're just like, oh, this looks like every other pitch that I've been sent about something related to fashion or something related to culture, they may not respond. So you're really going to have to figure out a way that will make you stand out. Whether that be your subject line before you send the email off, whether that be the bullet points that you come up with, whether it be a unique way to follow up with that editor. Honestly, back when I was just starting out, when I was in college, I definitely used to straight up get on Twitter and at people. And one example I'm going to give you was a story that I wrote when I was in college about Lena Waithe. This was before she won an Emmy. This was before she did Queen and Slim. This was literally when I was just an eager, young, and hungry college student. So what I did was I had already followed Lena on Twitter. Honestly, I feel like I have followed her for maybe a year or so. And I was just really inspired by what her and Justin Simien had did with Dear White People, which was a film that they created. They had raised money on Kickstarter, and they were able to film and shoot the movie. Tessa Thompson was the main character at that time. Logan Browning is the main character now in the Netflix show, but this was years ago when the movie actually came out in theaters. So what I did was I added her and told her, I was like, hi, I'm really interested in writing about you for my campus magazine. Can you follow me back? And she did. So next thing I knew, we hopped on a call. I interviewed her. And it was kind of funny because I actually could hear her driving because LA, is 3 hours behind. So she actually was like out, like handling her morning, like while I was doing the interview. But this only happened because I really pushed myself to reach out to her literally on social media. And that's what made me stand out. And that's what made me different because I actually put myself out there. Didn't matter if I felt that I was going to be embarrassed. Didn't matter if I felt like she wasn't going to respond. She actually ended up responding. So I just wanted to share that story so that you all understood that if you don't hear back from an editor, don't be discouraged. Definitely try to follow up maybe 2 or 3 times. If they don't reach out after that third time of following up, you just got to let it go. And also want to be sure to let you all know it's fine to email more than one editor at a time about the same story, but I would limit it to maybe about 2 publications. Don't email 10 people. Don't do that. You want to be very specific about who you're reaching out to, the timeline on when you're reaching out to people, because that definitely is going to help you gauge that timeline. So that is all of the tips that I have. So what I'm going to do is go ahead and start off again, just to do a quick run through of the tips. 1, again, is select the publication. 2 is selecting the subject that you're going to be writing about. 3 is selecting the rate that you're going to be sending out to that editor. And 4, what makes you different. And I just want to spend a little bit more time on the last step because I definitely think that this can be beneficial to people who are interested in writing for different publications. And like I was saying earlier, the what makes you different part of the pitch that you're sending out doesn't have to be added, but this is something that you should definitely keep in mind moving forward. And when you're figuring out what makes you different, I just want to stress to add within your pitch what is going to make you different. It could be maybe doing like a quick Zoom shoot. Like I definitely have been finding that's very popular. Say if you're interested in doing a Q&A or a profile on someone, it could even be someone in your own community. It could be a friend of yours that you think dresses really cool. What you could do is have all of these assets done already and have that shoot, have everything done. And what you could do when you're sending this to an editor is literally send them one really cool photo of that shoot that you did within that email. And that might grab their attention. So that's just another unique way that you could set yourself aside from other people that are sending fashion pitches over to editors at places like Vogue, Teen Vogue, Nylon, any other publications that you're interested in pitching to. And another way to make yourself stand out is to be extremely specific with what topic you're going to be writing about, how you're going to be tackling that. And an example I'll give you is a piece that I did for Nylon on SZA's Control album when it came out. I actually did an essay review style for that album. And that ended up coming into fruition from an email that I sent over to an editor there. I was given the contact from someone that I know, but I guarantee if the pitch wasn't tailored the way that it was, she probably would have ignored it. And so in that email, I was extremely specific and I let her know my rate. I let her know a few bullet points on what I wanted to handle for that essay on control. And it ended up working out. So that's just another example for you all. This was so much fun. Thank you so much for watching. Oh, I see another question coming in. Who was my favorite interview? As of recent, I think one of my most favorite interviews was definitely Megan Thee Stallion. This was before she blew up. This was when I was at my last job. Loved it. Completely enjoyed meeting her. We did a quick photo shoot with her. Her stylist actually hooked this up for me. He's from Ohio, and one of my colleagues set it up for us. So that was just pretty dynamic, being able to sit down with her and talk for about an hour to really get to know her. I met her mom, who unfortunately is no longer living. And, it was a great experience. I really enjoyed sitting and talking with her. Oh, I see another question coming in. How do publications or editors feel about stories coming in? I think that that's a great question. I think that publications and editors try to get to the pitches that they see coming in, but we're all human, so sometimes we're not able to catch every single pitch that we see coming in. And even me as a staff writer, I definitely try to get to all of the pitches coming in. I do my best. But I just wanted to say, oh, I see another question coming in. A job that I look back at and say was my most favorite job. Honestly, my current job right now is one of the best roles that I think that I can sit back and reflect on even as I'm still here. And I really love it. Staff writer, okay player. What makes me less likely to respond to a pitch? That's a great question. Honestly, if the pitch is extremely long, I just don't have the time. And my team doesn't have the time, I believe, to read through something if it's looking like it's like 400 or 500 words. Gotta chop that up into maybe 150 words or maybe 200 words. And I think that that would make it a little bit easier and a little bit more of a flow to be able to read through that entire pitch. Another question coming in. Where do I see myself in 5 to 10 years? Am I doing what I need to do to get there? I would say 5 years. I would love to be the editor in chief of a publication, and there's not much higher that you can get than that. I definitely think I'm doing the steps that I need to get there currently, because editor in chiefs start off at the bottom, work their way up. Wow, this is a great question. How do you build relationships with other editors without seeming like a stalker? Ooh, that's actually pretty funny. um, I think that the way to build relationships right now is a little hard because we're all in the house, but I think a great way to build a relationship with someone is just figure out what their interests are. Definitely be familiar with the work that they're creating. And what you can do is figure out their email, hit them up, and just say, hi. I'll give you an example. This is something I'd send. Hi, I'm Robyn, a staff writer, okay player. I've been keeping up with your work about X, Y, and Z. Maybe for the past couple of years, however long you've been reading their work and been staying consistent with the work that they're creating. And make sure that you're including that. And then follow up with the following paragraph about how you'd love to hop on a quick 15 or 20-minute phone call with them to just chat about whether you'd like advice or tips on the industry, if that's what you're seeking. If you're not looking for advice, don't say the call, but you could just send them a note every month and just say, hey, checking in. This is what I've been working on. Can I help in any way? I hope that that response helped, and definitely don't feel like a stalker at all. Like, just try to foster those relationships by checking in on people. I see another question coming in about how to build relationships without seeming weird on Twitter. I definitely think you can foster relationships on social media, but I just want to reiterate, be extremely aware of the type of work that that editor or writer is doing. Don't slide into the DMs if you're literally just doing it randomly. Like, you've got to come in with a game plan. And if you're going to be emailing them, also have a game plan with what I was sharing earlier. If you're looking for advice, be honest and say that. Be straight up and let them know that you're looking for advice. If you're looking to build a relationship, a friendship, you can let them know that you're trying to build relationships with editors and writers covering the same topics that you're covering. Don't be afraid to share that. People love honesty. I love honesty too. I recently put a call out on Twitter saying that if there's any writers that are interested in getting advice or figuring out how I got my start in the industry, I let them know that my email is on my website and that I'm open to creating and fostering relationships with people. So definitely don't be afraid to do that. And my website is robynmowatt.com. Oh, wow, this is another great question. Do you charge by how long it takes? And in terms of the rate, that's also something that I've had to learn to do. You up your rate if the story is more extensive. For example, you could charge $500 to $700 if something is going to be a cover story, or you might charge more. If something is going to be longer than 1,000 words, you may charge 500. If something is looking like 8,000 words, you could charge upwards of maybe $5,000 for a piece like that. It really depends on what you're comfortable with, your level of experience, and the relationship that you've built with that editor, or the relationship you've built with that publication that you're going to be writing for. I hope that answers that question. Do I allow publishers to edit my work before publishing it? Really depends on what publication you're at. Every publication is different. If you're a freelancer, your work is going to be edited before it's published. Where I'm at right now, yes, my work is definitely edited before it's posted on the .com. This is a great question. How do I approach? Ooh, it went by so quick. How do I approach my researching when I am writing a story? Once again, depends on what type of story. So, say, for example, one of the recent stories that I did was on Ethel's Club. They actually launched a parent company. That was an exclusive story that I did. Because of the nature of that story, I actually didn't have to interview anyone for that piece, because Naj Austin, the founder of Ethel's Club, she actually reached out to me, and I was able to handle that within maybe about 2 days, because she reached out, let me know that I was getting the exclusive on it. What I did was I sent over a few questions via email to her directly, and that was inserted in the story. Another recent story that I did was on Ilam, an emerging R&B artist. I recently did a First Look Friday story with her, and because it was a Q&A style, she was the only person that I reached out to for that story. So that was the level of research that I did for that piece was going back and reading interviews that she had done previously. Also, I tend to listen to the music of an artist that I'm covering a lot, just to like get kind of a focus and like understanding more so of their lyrical content. And another example I'd give is a piece that I'm working on right now, on Naj and Ethel's Club. And I've interviewed her twice. I interviewed another person on her team, and I'm actually getting ready to reach back out to interview a third person on her team. And 3 sources to me is not extensive, because I want to make sure that I get an introspective look on not just the subject, but also on the, because they were actually getting ready to launch more for Ethel's Club. And because of the pandemic, we had to actually change the narrative a bit on that story and get more insight on what Ethel's Club is actually doing. And what they've done is they've shifted over to digital. They still have memberships. So that's also why I wanted to reach back out to her again, like after social distancing maybe ends. The story is going to be completely different, because initially the story was going to be on Ethel's Club before COVID even happened. So sometimes if a story angle changes, you might have to do a little bit more research. You might have to talk to another source. You might have to figure out a new game plan for a story. Oh, wow. This is another great question. Should an editorial story be submitted in full before you send over your pitch? Absolutely not. You should never send over an entire story complete before you send it over. Because unfortunately, what can happen is your story is actually taken and ran, maybe anonymously, or maybe under someone else's name. So you never want to send over a pitch to an editor completely done. It's fine to send a few sentences if you really are trying to stand out. Okay, this is great. How many hours should you look to put in a day when you're trying to figure out your career path? Thank you for that question. I mean, for me as a writer, maybe you're thinking about writing as like a part-time thing. I would say you could dedicate a couple of hours. 2 hours to me is not extensive. You could try to write a quick story a day, whether that be a news story or just like maybe even you writing about your day to build your writing skills on description and feelings and essay writing if that's the type of writing that you're interested in. 2 hours or 3 hours a day, don't feel like that's extensive, and you could dedicate that time to either writing or just like catching up with the news that's happening. Wow. Okay, another question. At what age did editors start to take you serious? Um, Honestly, I feel like there was no age. Every publication that I was at started off at Ebony. I was fresh out of school, and I was taken pretty seriously for what I could contribute. I immediately started writing for them when I started off there. Immediately was transcribing for the editors there. A lot of great opportunities came to me, and I want to say I was either 22 or 23 when I first started off. So if you're able to prove that you can hold weight even as an intern, don't be discouraged by how old you are. The opportunities are going to be there. The team is going to realize the value that you can bring into them. Oh, this is great. 3 action steps I would give to someone in high school that wants to become a professional writer. I would say one, figure out why you love writing, because if you can't figure that out, you're going to have to struggle a little bit with your why. And I want to make sure that that's clear, because sometimes I get tired. Sometimes I want to give up. Sometimes I really just don't know why I am a writer or an editor. And my why is because every day I wake up and I'm passionate about telling a story. Secondly, I would say figure out which subject area you find yourself drawn to. That could be art, it could be food, it could be cooking, it could be tech, it could be fashion, like me. It could be music or culture, which are two things that I'm drawn to. So definitely figure out the subject area that you want to write about. And third, I would say seek out the resources at your school that can allow you to flourish and grow as a writer. Maybe that's by reaching out to your AP English teacher. Maybe that's by sitting down with your counselor and figuring out what resources your school has that can help improve your writing skills if you really want to take it seriously. But I think that we can take a couple more questions. This has been so amazing. We are going to keep the questions coming in. Would I suggest already doing reporting or interviewing sources before pitching a story? Is it more likely to be approved? That's a great question. I would say, mm, I think it's smart to not do any work for free, honestly. And I probably would have answered this differently if I wasn't 5 years in, but I don't think anyone should do any work for free. So if you have a couple sources in mind, definitely feel free to share maybe one of those in the pitch that you're sending over, but don't do any work for free, guys. If you have sources in mind, that's great. Keep a rolling list of that if you're getting ready to do a profile or a story that takes extensive research, but don't do any work for free. All that's going to do is stress you out. Okay, we've got another question. Do you get nervous before interviews? How do you deal with any anxiety or nervous feelings? That's a great question. I would say I definitely sometimes do get nervous, but the luxury of where I'm at right now in my career is I'm at a publication that really respects what I bring to the table. And I'm never thrown stories that I'm not interested in. So I have great relationships with the publicists for the teams that I'm working on stories with for their talent or for their artists. So I do get a little nervous sometimes, but my way of powering through that is understanding that I'm the right person to tell that story. And sometimes I listen to Dua Lipa before these interviews that I'm doing. Like, I've been doing a lot of interviews on Instagram Live, and I find that it can be a little draining. So I try to listen to the artists that I really love before these interviews. I try to make sure that I'm relaxing before these interviews, and I try to really just de-stress myself completely before these interviews. And we've got one more question. How much prep work goes into an in-depth live interview? The most recent one that I can think of that took place was Brandy. That was a lot of fun. And the prep that I did for that was I had about 2 days to prepare myself. And so what I did was I went and read a bunch of articles about Brandy and about her artistry. I was reading things on Billboard. I was reading just like different old interviews that she had done. And I actually was like going back and re-listening to her first album, going back and listening to her second album, going back and listening to her third album. Watched her new video that she had with Chance the Rapper, the new song that she had out from a few weeks ago. And for the live interview, I prepared myself by doing the research, listening to the music to just kind of get more of a feel of it because I did grow up listening to her. So what I also do is I have all of my bullet points that I want to make sure that I handle for these live interviews, type all of that out. And thankfully, I have a team that is willing and can dedicate themselves to look through all of those bullet points. And they're honest with me. They let me know if they're not feeling something, and they look through that, and I go from there. And that is going to be the conclusion of my episode, you all. Thank you so much for joining me with how to pitch an editorial. And if you're interested in reading my work, head to robynmowatt.com. I'm going to spell that out for anyone that's not familiar with how to spell my last and first name. ROBYNMOWATT.com. And you can also find me on Twitter. My handle there is Robyn_Mowatt. And on Instagram, my handle is @Robyn Mowatt. Thank you so much to everyone that tuned in. I'm readily accessible. I'm available. Don't feel like you can't reach out. Definitely hit me up on Twitter. Definitely feel free to hit me up on Instagram. If I don't follow you, don't be afraid to DM me. And this was such a great time. Looking forward to hearing from you all, aspiring writers and journalists.